Hi, Jolien.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being here and for taking the time. Maybe we stay here, then we can also have, you brought a presentation with you. The idea is to talk about storytelling in driving systems to change. And you do that in creating a platform, and you do that in engaging in visual language, and you do that in moving image, and you do that in relation to the cinema and entertainment industry. Maybe you want to elaborate a little bit about what is WaterBear all about, what are you doing?
It is all in the presentation, so I don't know how much I should say already. But WaterBear is a global media company, and we're using storytelling and films to drive change at scale. We're 3 years old. We started more, the media would call us a Netflix for nature, because if you would open our app or our web, you would see a traditional streaming experience, but then filled with documentaries based on social and environmental issues, both very confrontational but also hopeful. But it's not just that we're doing. We're also connecting the films to campaigns and through things that you can do as an individual, because we don't want to leave it at just being informed, but we also want to get people involved in a movement. So, yeah, and many other different things.
Yeah, thank you very much for the quick summary and introduction. Maybe I'll just have you present us what you brought along. You brought clips, you brought an insight into your practice, and then we can continue the conversation afterwards.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you still also for being here. I know it's a long day, it's an inspiring day, so I'm going to try to bring the energy back. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I'm going to show some clips. So yeah, thanks for being here. My name is Jolien. I'm the head of impact at WaterBear. And today I want to talk about the role of storytelling, and particularly films, to drive change at scale. Because we're not only living in a crisis of biodiversity loss, of nature loss, of the climate crisis, it's in essence also a communication crisis. There's many different challenges at the moment when it comes to communicating actually about environmental and social issues. On the one hand, you have a lot of bias, a lot of misinformation. We're dealing with information overload, which leads to the fact that a lot of people become sort of paralyzed and don't know what to do anymore, what to believe anymore. On the other hand, you have a lot of great researchers, non-profits, government officials like yourself working together to figure out what the biggest challenges but also solutions are. But often this tend to stay in their own echo chamber and within their own audiences, and hardly does it really reach the masses. Jessie from Ben & Jerry was earlier here today. She mentioned that within their audience, if they name human rights as a term, the audience just get disengaged, even though they want to be active and want to be engaged. So let alone if you think about terms like CO2 or global footprint, or all of those terms, like people just disengage. It's not going to help. The good thing is, and this is from a recent study that we did in the UK, a lot of people do want to be part of the change, and a lot of people want to be involved. They just don't know how or what to do and what's the most effective that they can do. And it's also not just about individual behavior, it's also trying to make the link between an individual and the policy or businesses. And so really our future depends on the imagination of today. That's one of the great beauties of storytelling or any form of art. It can really show what's not there yet, and we need to use that imagination. It's also a reference to the great art piece over there that shows over the years how can the world and society looks like, both from a good perspective or a little bit of a less perspective, but we really need it, and we believe it starts with a good story. So a little bit about WaterBear. So maybe I should first take a moment to explain the name, because we get a lot of questions. And while it's not the prettiest creature out there, it is the most resilient one. So waterbears, or maybe better known as tardigrades, can really survive any harsh conditions there are on the planet. They can survive boiling water. They've even been found on the moon. So it's a reference to the fact that we have to be very resilient as a community. Yeah, and that's where the name WaterBear is coming from. So yeah, I think what better way is there to show a small clip about who we are.
Every single time I have a problem, it was like, there must be more to life than this.
What we've learned thus far is nearly beyond imagination.
A responsibility to do what's right rather than just what is the law. What's morally right is more important.
this moment in my life, I would actually be very happy to just stop.
Go on with that! Fucking go, bro!
Delays. We've got quarterly targets to hit.
Only do that collectively.
Yeah, so we are, thank you. WaterBear is a global impact media network, and so we're using films and storytelling to really drive the change. So, as I said at the beginning, the media would often call us Netflix for nature, but it's way more than that. We try to connect all the films with campaigns, with NGOs, with the right things to do, whether that's learning more or being part of a collective. And one important thing to mention as well is that our platform is completely free. We don't want to ask any subscription or money from individuals, because we don't believe that important story like these should be behind a paywall. So that's another part. But actually, it's not only about the story that you tell is important, but also how that story is made and with who. Because unfortunately, the film and the documentary industry is a very unsustainable industry and also a very unequal industry. And there's a lot of irony, I guess, in the fact that a lot of films and documentaries that are talking about climate change are using a lot of different flights around the world to showcase that. And there's people that have said, if I see one more filmmaker going to film that falling iceberg, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, we have enough of those films already. And then another part is that actually the film and documentary industry is very unequal. And this is a very important thing to address on, especially here, because it's addressing both those issues. It's a systemic issue that it comes down to the fact that, you know, from years before, access to the documentary and filmmaking industry is actually only for the ones that come with privilege, that have the money, that have the connections, and that have been to the best universities. A report last year that analyzed 1,500 documentaries that were distributed on Netflix, on HBO, and the big broadcasters, saw that 75% of the documentaries were produced by white male-identifying directors. And while I have nothing against white men, documentaries tend to be the truth tellers, and they should show an accurate representation of the world. And I think we can all agree on that. The world doesn't exist about 70% of white males. So even female filmmakers and female filmmakers from color tend to have are nearly invisible across the major platforms, and that's a huge issue. It's one of the reasons that we work with a decentralized production model. And what that means is that we don't fly people around the world to make the documentaries. We work with local film crews on the ground. So that doesn't only mean that you limit your emissions, it also means that you would support local economies and that you work with people who own their own stories. So it's not to us to tell the stories about people living elsewhere. It's up to them to really tell those stories. One other part that we really believe in is collaboration. So we collaborate with a lot of brands, but also nonprofits. And the beauty is really when they join forces together. So I want to show one example of where Jack Wolfskin, who is an outdoor retailer, joined forces with Foundation Carpathia, who is a nonprofit that want to preserve the Carpathian Mountains. And they have this shared mission. And so it's one of the short examples that I wanted to show today.
No villages, no roads, no nothing, just a real pure wilderness. huge trees. They've been here for hundreds of years. Every single one is an individual. Everyone looks totally different from the other. How many people, how many animals, how much time walked through these forests, and these trees were always there. You get so humble there. You start to realize, how small you are in this big universe.
I've come here to see a lot of new animals I haven't seen before, and also just to experience this, I don't know, this wildness of this place. It's just beautiful.
Another example is called a short film that we created that's called The Black Mermaid. So this is Sandy that you would see on the picture. She's one of the few black female South African freedivers. And she approached us. She hadn't made a film before, but she wanted to write and edit and produce this film to show two things. One is sort of the appreciation to the ocean and the closeness to the ocean and why we need to preserve it. But secondly, also to address the fact that a lot of ocean activities, like diving, which if you are into diving, I'm very much into diving, and if you start to be into diving or any ocean sport, you will also immediately get to appreciate the ocean and you want to protect it. But local people living in South Africa, living next to the ocean, don't have access and don't have the privilege to even be part of these activities. So she also wanted to raise awareness to the fact that actually those things are also very unequal. And so this is a very nice example of where Sandy herself was the writer, the producer, the director of the short film. We work with her and with the local crew in South Africa to tell that story.
When I was growing up, I will never forget the fear I had of drowning. We were told endless stories around why we shouldn't be anywhere near deep waters. The sardine run was a phenomena I'd heard about for years, that the world traveled to come see here in my country, and so wondered if I would ever have the opportunity to witness this wild world for myself. In this finding of the sea is the hope to inspire this exploration in black communities with the incredible life source the ocean is.
And so one last example that I want to show, and this is a project that I've been working on a lot last year. It's also the fact that we're not only producing and distributing the films, but we want to go further than that. It's not just about people seeing it and then going on with their lives. We're really trying to see how can we use film as a tool to create impact. And in this case, we worked together with people who had to flee their countries to the UK specifically, and wanted to talk a story about how hard it is actually to arrive in a new country, but also the new bills and new legislation that was about to be announced there. The UK was calling it the illegal migration bill. We reframed it with a lot of NGOs to not call it an illegal migration bill because there's no such thing as illegal migration. So we reframed it as a refugee ban bill. But together with a group of non-profits and together with people from lived experience, they directed, they written, they edited this film because they wanted to show their perspective. And yeah, let's have a quick look.
These billboards about a breaking point. They were used to push the Leave EU agenda.
This film is essentially presenting an experience that many viewers would have never heard of, would have never been able to empathize with, would have never had access to. So what we're offering with film is access to a whole nother world and a whole nother perspective.
The film was, written by us, directed by us, shot by us, and edited by us. Collaborating with our friends who already are in the industry, who could help us make this film together.
This film was actually, so you saw a little bit behind the scenes, but this film was a docu-fiction And what that means is sort of it's a combination. It's based on the lived experience. It's based on a true story, but you sort of play it. And so it was based on a true story of the writer of the documentary. And we also created the behind the scenes to tell the story on how you can bring more people into the film industry and into the movement. With the film, we ran a big impact campaign as well. So we were collaborating with a lot of NGOs in the UK and with people from the community to see how can we use the film to also mobilize people to do something. And as I said, it was a bill that was just going to be announced, the illegal migration bill. And so we used the launch of the film to create a big pop-up in central London, working with NGOs to bring people in. We had a lot of different forms of arts, from film, of course, to photography, to spoken word, to poems, to bring people in that community through the forms of art and really showcase that personalized experience. Because I think one of the issues, especially with this topic and with refugee rights in general, is that it's portrayed in the media as very dehumanizing and very much in the numbers and sort of like on the negative lens. Well, if you see the personal stories, and that's also the beauty of communication and of media marketing in generally, it's so important that it's been portrayed in the right way. And so we had in the first weekend, we had 5,000 people writing the letters to the MPs, asking to halt the bill. We had a lot of views in the first weeks. We had a lot of partnerships. We did local screenings just to get the word out. So yeah, that is a little bit about WaterBear and the role of storytelling. So we're really keen to collaborate with as many brands, non-profits, activists, communities here. We're very open for any conversation with policymakers. We would love to know how can we use film as a tool to also engage policymakers. How can we connect individuals with policies? We're very happy to chat with anyone after. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Jolien Walhof, in actually explaining what impact production can be. I think it's a term that, especially in the cinematic realm, has really been a word of mouth for the last 2 years, really almost a hype around it, oftentimes quite empty. But in your case, walking us through the many different layers and stages, what it means to do sustainable production, what it means to create access on so many different levels when it comes to changing production mechanisms, when it comes to changing the logics of distribution. I think picking up the idea of the platform that many of us are being used to, consumers of daily entertainment, what TV was is now platform generated, to actually foster and sustain civic engagement and documentary filmmaking, but not only, as we have heard, because you did mention hybrid formats. I think in the reel we also saw a cartoon. Yeah. So that makes me wonder, how do you go about programming? How do you actually go about agenda setting? And how does this actually intersect when it comes to deciding on what productions to go about?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And indeed, we're doing hybrid models. So we're trying to move away from sort of the more traditional documentary storytelling, because that also only engaged a certain amount of public. So we're trying to bring sort of entertainment with documentary together to reach a larger audience. Programming is a good question. We're at the moment actually in the process of figuring out what our impact thematic areas of the year will be. And it's really going to be a combination on what's, of course, on the political agenda, what's going to be important for nonprofits, but also what are brands and what are individuals interacting with. So we need to find it from different layers to figure out what do people want to watch, but also what do they need to watch. Because often a lot of the things you don't know yet what you need to watch or what you need to learn. So it's figuring out that balance. But it's definitely going to have a very strong climate angle, but obviously with an intersectional lens of climate justice, of course.
The not yet knowing what you need to watch very much relates to what you were pointing to in the very beginning when you talked about the imaginary. Yeah. And I was wondering if you were willing to elaborate on the potential of the imaginary when it comes to, you said storytelling, but also artistic forms as cinema, because there's not only the story-driven part, but there's the whole realm of sound, image, and immersive artistic engagement that is happening there.
Yeah, I think that imagination part is especially important because we have so many negative messages in the media, which are obviously needed, and it creates that spark of urgency, and we do not need to ignore them, but also we need to be careful that we're not falling into the trap of doomerism, because the moment that it's all doomed, people would disengage and be like, whoa, it's going to be, we're doomed anyway. There's no solution. Like, I don't know what I can do. It's like it's too far ahead. And I think that's the biggest challenge, actually, if we're falling in that trap. So we do need to have that imagination of how a society, how a future could look like, and how could we change it differently, because it's also not up to the individual. Like, we're very clear about that. It's really the combination of businesses, governments, but also as an individual, you do hold some power in how you vote, how you consume, how you eat, how you dress. But it needs to come together.
It very much translates me also to something that you were talking about earlier when you said about the communication crisis, because on the one hand, you're operating within the realm of entertainment, and there's a certain tiredness to engaging with something that is maybe connoted as heavy, as burdening, as the urgency to change something about my habits. But I think with what you're saying, there lies the potential of imagining oneself into new ways of being or living and moving and navigating, and that can be actually fun, and it can look fun. And I think this is really, that was something that was made very clear in your presentation, that it doesn't have to be depressing and heavy and sad, even though many of the realities depicted are, but the way these are conveyed, there's so many different expressions and formal approaches to that. So I was wondering, because you already pointed to the different productions that you're bringing on board. There's sometimes filmmakers approaching you, sometimes you reach out and you actually commission. But then you were also pointing to the realm of partnerships. You have a bunch of NGOs, you have a bunch of people from, or not people, but entities, very many entities from the economic center, sorry, it's not center, but from the economic realm, but also you were pointing to the possibility of working and collaborating with policymakers. So I was wondering maybe about this partnership model. Is there something that you want to share, particularly also in this space, translating from the film and entertainment industry into very ground-based human rights practice?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we collaborate with brands more on the storytelling and the production of films. So obviously, I said, like, we're a free platform. We want to remain free for the individual, and therefore our commercial sort of business model is coming from production from the brand side from the brand side. With the nonprofits, we have very different ways of collaborating. So that could be them using our films as a tool for their campaigning. It could be a strategic collaboration on a film to know what kind of message you have to put out there. There's many different ways. There could be that we link films to their organization and their campaign, or to join forces. So yeah, it's a really collaborative approach.
Yeah, thank you very much. It seems to be also very multi-directional, and that could be important, also very fruitful in a space like that, where you have many representatives of NGOs, of civil society present. So feel free to approach WaterBear, and don't miss the chance to check out their homepage and make use of their very accessible and very broad entertainment and also impact production when it comes to film, cinema, and documentary. Thank you very, very much for your presentation and for your presence. And this also leads us towards the very end of this day. So at this point, I would very much like to say thank you for staying with us, also to our online audiences, for actively engaging in the discussions via Slido, for following, for jumping in, and for being here. This is a hybrid space, an expansive space, and that is very much made clear through that. So enjoy the rest of your night, and we hope to see many of you back tomorrow. And the same is valid for the rest of the space. Thank you very much for being around, for being here with us, and for this wonderful first day of the Fundamental Rights Forum 2024. We're very much looking forward to seeing you tomorrow morning here in the same space for the third thematic strand of the forum. And also now, it's my pleasure to invite everyone to the evening reception down in the wonderful atmosphere of the courtyard of the Rathaus. Thank you very much, and have a good night.